Hey guys, what is up? Today we'll be collecting more tears, debunking more flat earthers. You know, we're pretty lucky. Born too late to explore the Earth, born too early to explore the galaxy, but born just in time to witness the existence of flat earthers. What a time to be alive. Anyway, I was just browsing the internet and I came across this flat earth video that is different than the others and talks about how the sun sets on a flat earth. Now, at this point you may think, this is just going to be another dumb flat earth visual demonstration, but the argument presented here is actually something I've never heard before, which is why I'm choosing to respond. Let's roll the clip.
Hi everyone, this is Karen B, and in this video I will do my best to give you the most comprehensive explanation of how the sun sets and rises on a flat earth.
Excellent! Yup, it's Karen B. I did a response a while ago addressing our model on eclipses. She tends to think more outside the box compared to other flat earthers. And while that is a compliment, that doesn't mean her explanations are any more sound than the others. And we're going to see why in this video.
Early on in the flat earth community, the most common answer to this question was simply perspective.
Perspective was probably the worst explanation that flat earthers could have came up with. It does not conform to reality whatsoever. Disappearing into a vanishing point is very, very different than setting below the earth. I think even I could think of a better argument. Let's see. Just kidding, there are no good explanations.
While this does play a part in how day and night work on flat earth, it's not the only thing at play. There are a few different things working together in harmony to create day and night on our plane. So, first, let's examine perspective.
So here she talks about how perspective works and how things further away appear to disappear towards the vanishing point. I won't be showing the clip here because that's not the main argument of the video. To be honest, I don't know why flat earthers are so hung up about giving such detailed explanations about this. Anyone with a brain would know how the vanishing point works. We don't need videos dedicated to explaining this. The problem is that when things move further away, they will never appear to set below something that is underneath them. In this case, the sun should never appear to disappear behind the earth. Everything else, when they get further away, disappear by shrinking into a size that can no longer to be seen. But no, for some reason the sun doesn't do that. It sinks below the ground instead. Excellent logic. But let's not focus too much on this point.
The next thing that causes the sun to set and rise is our atmosphere, or atmoplane, as I like to call it, since we live on a plane, not a sphere. There are multiple substances that make up our atmoplane: nitrogen, oxygen, argon, carbon dioxide, and importantly, water vapor. Water is the third most abundant substance in our air.
Well, actually that depends on where in the atmosphere you're looking at. At sea level it is indeed the third most abundant, but it falls behind argon in all other areas.
Water also has a great effect on light and how it propagates through the air. Think about the ocean. There are many layers of visibility. First you have the sunlight zone, which is the top layer we are in the most, and it's still easy to see in the water while the sun is overhead. Then you have the twilight zone, and the light is now less able to penetrate the water.
Yes, water does have an effect on how light travels. For one, it has a higher index of refraction compared to air, which causes light to bend towards the normal. But in the atmosphere, it's not just water vapor, it's the air in general. Depending on weather conditions, air can be more or less dense compared to areas of different altitudes. This is affected by many factors such as temperature. Atmospheric refraction has been a topic we've talked about a lot. It's why the sun appears in a different location than where it actually is. It's also why we can see cities and whatnot that supposedly are too far away to be seen. Most flat earthers don't actually believe in this type of refraction. What about you, Karen B?
This is a clip from a video made by my good friends Zach and Steve. In this animation, Steve rendered the stars over a flat Earth. The top is rendered with the atmoplane and the bottom is rendered without, showing how perspective alone does not explain how the luminaries appear to go below the horizon.
Nice of you to point this out. It's not that perspective works with anything to explain the sun setting below the earth, but more so that perspective itself is just irrelevant. It doesn't contribute at all in explaining a setting sun in a flat earth. Anyway, so far it seems that you are suggesting that water vapor's refraction abilities play a role in creating an illusion of the sun setting below the earth. A very, very interesting suggestion, I must say. But before I assume what your position is, let's hear from you yourself.
How does the atmoplane make the sun and other luminaries appear to set below the horizon? The water vapor in the air acts like a lens. This is called atmospheric lensing in mainstream science and is explained here.
Okay, we need to have a discussion on cherry-picking science. You can't just cherry-pick the parts you like and ignore the parts you don't like. Accepting atmospheric lensing and refraction while rejecting the globe Earth is just nonsense. Science is science. You either accept it all or you reject it all. Don't go cherry-picking only the parts you like.
So if you're looking at Chicago here, just maybe now you can just see the top of the Sears Tower, and if our simulated temperature inversion moves into place hopefully now you can see pretty much all of Chicago,
see all the lower buildings,
including what's at ground level.
So not only does the water eventually obstruct the light, but all the billions of tiny water droplets behave like a lens. You can emulate this with a lens and a light source like I do here. This candle will take the place of the sun. Watch as I slowly move it back in a straight line, and also it stays at the same height since I have it placed on this mason jar.
Yes, excellent. Finally, an explanation that makes more sense than just perspective. Alright, so there are many things I need to point out here. I do agree that this is the best argument I've heard, but it is still full of flaws. For one, atmospheric refraction isn't always present. In fact, depending on the condition of the atmosphere, it could just be normal or the opposite could happen. Which means if this model were true, then only sometimes would we see the sun set below the earth, and sometimes it would just disappear into the vanishing point. It wouldn't just be consistent every morning and every night. Atmospheric refraction doesn't just happen every day. Depending on the weather conditions and your location, lensing can happen to different degrees. One example is that a greater gradient of temperatures causes greater refraction, and that can be caused by a number of factors. Gradient of humidity and pressure are also essential factors. If the index of refraction is greater on the Earth's surface compared to higher above, then the light bends downwards, and vice versa, which leads me to my second point. The lensing you are showing in your demonstration is different than that of the video you showed before. While seeing the Chicago city is due to light bending downwards towards the Earth, the sun setting on a flat Earth demonstration there can only be done through the opposite, light bending away from the Earth. This is indeed possible though, so I won't dismiss it right away. Objects can appear to be lower than their actual positions, given the correct conditions, and this is generally more rare and happens more often in the afternoon. This is because the ground is usually hotter during the afternoon, which heats up the air closer to the Earth, which causes that air to be less dense compared to higher up, thus bending light away from the normal. This isn't something that always happens and happens less often during sunrise and sunset, which is why this model doesn't explain the sun's behavior on the flat Earth. I do applaud you for suggesting this though, but it is still flawed and isn't reality whatsoever.
The atmo plane and your vision create what we call a personal atmoplanic dome, or personal atmospheric dome, if you please.
Here's a good time to bring up a third point, addressing the visibility of the sun. I'm sure you're familiar with the argument that on a flat Earth, the sun should be visible at all points during the night. Atmospheric refraction and lensing doesn't happen 24/7 for all days of the week, so it makes no sense to never see the sun during the night. But then you brought up the argument that water in the air eventually dissipates the light from the sun if you are too far away. And yes, I am impressed by this argument. However, that only applies to water in its liquid state and not in its gaseous state. Clouds can block sunlight because it's liquid water, but water vapor is different. Now, it is true that the atmosphere can block sunlight though, due to the many solid particles and aerosols that exist, but it's not nearly enough to potentially block out all the sunlight if it were on the other side of the Earth during the night.
I went to this online tool that lets you create different simulations of a light source and a reflective surface, and this is simulating the sun over flat water. The light is radiating from the center of the source out in all directions. Look at how the light rays bounce off the reflective surface and off to the distance at an acute angle. So here's our observer again, and you could see the reflected ray reaches our observer before the source does. The light of the reflection is closer to us, so we see that before we see the sun itself.
Nope, you're not going to see the reflection first because the point of reflection is closer than the sun. That's just simply untrue. For the light to be able to reflect off the water at that angle to reach our eyes in the first place, the sun must be in view. So in other words, you see them both at the same time. There are a few instances, however, where you could see a reflection of the sun on the bottom of clouds before being able to see the actual sun though, but those situations are rare. It's one of the causes of a false sunrise.
Watch in this video how the sun's reflection begins to come into view, and it's not round, it's squashed, because it's reflecting at a sharp angle.
Not just the sun's reflection, but also the sun itself.
The water becomes a mirror and it's reflecting the sky. So when the sun approaches you and gets close enough for your eye to see it, the disk appears to rise up from the reflection because visually, it is now within the limits of your eyesight. This can only happen on a flat surface.
Okay, yes, the light can indeed reflect off the water. This leads me to a few questions that I believe are critical to be answered. First of all, this is only over water. If you have a sunrise in an area that isn't over an ocean, then we couldn't see this. What's the supposed illusion for that? See, it's important to be able to see our explanations in all other aspects. Now, addressing that phenomenon directly, yes, the reflection does happen. It's evident in the footage you just showed us. But to claim that it can only happen on a flat plane is nonsense. It can very much easily happen on a curved Earth as well. And in fact, this reflection actually proves its convexity. The type of reflection seen here is due to a degree of specular reflection, where the water acts like a mirror. With the sun, this type of reflection actually proves a small degree of observable convexity. Now, I won't be using the footage you gave since it's not very clear, but here are some other images. Here you can see a sunrise over Lake Michigan, which I pulled from a paper I found online. If the Earth were indeed flat, the reflection of the portion of the sun would be the same size as the actual sun, but instead we see a portion of it cut off and the reflection clearly portrays a bigger sun that appears to be closer. This is because of the convexity of the Earth, which causes the water to stretch the image before the light reaches our eyes, and this isn't just for the sun. Here's another image of some landscape. The height of the reflection is always shorter than that of the actual land, and that is due to the fact that the Earth is curved. While the height is shorter, the width is always the same. That's how you can tell. Now, if we were on a flat plane, the image should appear to be the exact same size as the actual object. But that doesn't appear to be the case, so for now it looks like we've earned another point for Team Globe Earth. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go grab my big paycheck from NASA. Before I go, huge shout out to Fireshard for being the top patron. I'll see you guys next week after I buy a new mansion with this paycheck.